Good afternoon, everyone, and happy Small Business Week. My name is Tracy Nyer, and I'm with the Virginia SBDC. I'll be your facilitator for today's webinar. For those of you who are not familiar, the Virginia SBDC is the largest and most effective provider of customized counseling and education for small businesses in Virginia. Most of our services are offered locally in 28 locations throughout the Commonwealth. Today's webinar is one of our educational offerings and is part of our ongoing webinar series, Google and Beyond, Marketing and Managing on the Web. Today's topic is getting inputs into actionable business data. All of our Google and Beyond webinars are presented by Ray Sidney Smith, a web and mobile strategist, author of Solo Mo Success, Social Media, Local and Web Small Business Marketing Strategy Explained, and president of W3 Consulting. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type those questions into the question window, and Ray will do his best to answer them. Without further ado, here's Ray Sidney Smith.
Thank you, Tracy, and thank you to the Virginia SBDC Network for having me here on the webinar series. As Tracy said, happy National Small Business Week. You're the economic drivers and economic engines of our country, and we all appreciate you being in business. And so today we're going to be talking about getting inputs into actionable business data. We're going to be talking about basically web-based surveys and forms for your small business. A couple of housekeeping items. One, now is the time to ask questions. As I say on every webinar, we do these live so that you're able to go ahead and interact and engage. So if you have a question, ask it in the question panel, and Tracy will be able to either, insert herself into the conversation so that I can answer them in line during the presentation, or we can do that in the question and answer period afterwards. So she might hold some questions for you afterward. Feel free to go ahead and ask me questions afterward. I'll have my email address on the final slide, but I'm a Twitter fanatic, and so feel free to go ahead and ask me questions on Twitter at W3 Consulting. You can hashtag that beyond Google. And finally, follow at Virginia SBDC so you can stay up to date on future webinars, but also other programs being provided throughout the Commonwealth for you. Okay. Note that I was also having a little bit of internet issue hearing a little bit earlier. So if for some reason I drop out, please let Tracy know and I will be happy to repeat myself. For those of you who don't know me, as Tracy said, I'm the president of W3 Consulting. I also happen to be a Google Small Business Advisor. What that is a set of advisors throughout the globe. We are, I guess, around 25 or so of us that help the Google Small Business team help small businesses like you with the various Google products, whether that be G Suite, Google My Business, Google Analytics, or Google AdWords. If you go to the website on your screen, it's a free resource for small business owners to go and ask questions. So if you have issues, feel free to head over there and ask questions. I'm also an Evernote certified consultant, so if you're interested in Evernote, always feel free to talk to me about Evernote. And I'm also a Hootsuite Global Brand Ambassador, and really excited always to help people with regard to their questions regarding the social media dashboard software Hootsuite. So there you go. Today's agenda is pretty simple. We're going to talk about why you want to capture customer data using online forms, and this is of course in opposition, I guess, to paper, how to capture documents through paper or even digital ways that we typically capture information, whether that be sending an email and asking for information by email, or even sending the dreaded PDF fillable form back and forth to a client, or sending a PDF that a client has to then fill out and mail back to you or whatnot. So we're going to talk about why you would want to actually capture customer data using online forms. We're then going to talk about what kind of data you can capture via these online forms and surveys, and then what tools are available today. I'm going to go over 5 or 6 or 7 tools that I think are really helpful for business owners to be able to not only streamline the process of creation, designing, and then implementation and analysis and synthesis of this information, because it's really important for us all to really be able to have the best tools available to us. So that's what we're going to do in terms of the agenda for today. So let's and then, of course, I'll leave a couple of minutes at the end for question and answer. So we'll have that time for questions and answers, okay? So why capture customer data using forms and surveys? First and foremost, surveys or online forms and surveys come to this real sort of reality factor here, which is that a lot of business owners come to me and they say to me, Ray, I don't understand my target market. I need to know why my particular product is not selling. I need to understand why the service line isn't doing as well, or why I'm getting such bad customer, sort of feedback when I speak to my customers one-to-one. And it comes down to this real reality factor, which is that small business owners, because we start the business, they're kind of like our children, right? We think we know them so well, and then when our children do things that seem outside of the construct, they somehow do something wrong, or they lash out in a way that we are not used to seeing them, we're shocked. And that's because we don't know. Our children at some point become their own individuals. They become their own persons. It's the same thing with a business. Our businesses frequently, either because they're new, we don't know our customers or our target market well enough, or after a while we've been in business, we think we know our customers so well that when things don't go the way we think they should, it's because we just don't have all the answers. And the ultimate tool for being able to find those answers is to ask. Ask your customers, whether they be past, present, or future customers. It's really important for you to be able to collect information from them, not just before you start the business in terms of market research, during the business engagement, which could be, while you're working on a project with them, or while they're looking at a product inside your store, figuring out those kinds of things, but also after the project in terms of debriefing, figuring out what happened that really wowed them, right? So that they'd be excited to share with you the positive details, but also the stuff that didn't work so well. What didn't go well, and how can we make sure that that doesn't happen again for a future customer, or the specific customer again if they're repeat business. So it sounds, sort of for some obtuse that you don't have all the answers about your own business, but it's just a reality. And for those of us who don't know yet what's going on, it's really helpful for us to be able to ask those questions of not only our customers, but also vendors and marketing alliances and general community and other people. And online forums are a really great way to do that. So you don't have all the answers, and that's okay. But we know that we can ask for those, and that's what online forms and surveys are really all about. Buyers have data that is really important to your business, and if you are not collecting that data, then you're missing, the ship basically sails past. And so I think that a lot of times what business owners don't recognize is that consumers and customers are consistently creating data points about themselves. And if we give them the opportunity to give that to us, they frequently do so freely. They do so givingly. So why not create the touch points that are really another form of customer service and marketing, while collecting that data, which again becomes stronger marketing research, and then we can create business data-driven decisions that help our business, profit, serve our customers better, etc. So use this vital data that buyers have that you need in order to be able to compete on, a market level. Think about the way in which you have to compete with potentially big business today. And the fact of the matter is that big business is collecting this data. And so you as a small business, because the technology is just available to you now, you need to start collecting it as well so that you can make good or better decisions than big business. Today, online forms and surveys are just so easy for customers that it makes absolutely no sense for you not to use the online version versus the offline version. And the other side is that we want to make it easy for our customers. Most often than not, when you give a customer a paper form or something to fill out, via email or otherwise, that requires way more thinking. It requires them to print something out, or they walk in the store and they have to go ahead and do those things, or you tell them, well, you have to come into the store in order to even be able to fill out this particular form or document. That is just not convenient, okay? And when we talk about things that create competitive advantage, obviously convenience is one of those factors. So we want to make it easy. We just want to make it easy for our customers, and that's really great. The other side and the flip side to that is that once you've collected something digitally, it's frequently really easy to capture that on the business side in in different ways, which means that you can do that in volume and with consistency. So that's the really important thing about data, right? It's veracity of the data. And many times what happens is that you get disparate sets of data. You know, a client fills out a form one day, down the road they fill out the form, another time, and that information disparity is capable of setting you up for failure, right? Because if you pick up one form, you get one set of data. If you pick up another form, you get another set of data. And if you make that decision, you have to make that in terms of a binary choice, right? You have 1 or 0, right? And in this particular case, when you have an online form, you only have one data set, right? You only have one choice for the customer to be able to fill out, and therefore they can go ahead and edit that form and choose a different option, but there aren't two options available to them. And that's the really important part here, is that with the volume comes this ability to abstract only limit only one choice for a customer to be able to provide to you in certain circumstances, so that if they like red products, they're going to get red products. If they like blue products, they're going to get blue products, but they're not going to get red and blue products, or red when they really mean blue, or blue when they really mean red, right? That's just something that you want to be able to provide consistently to your customer. And if you don't know that, or if they've given you conflicting responses in paper, the digital just cleans that up. And I think that's really helpful. And that's a simplistic, example, but there are much more sophisticated scenarios where this is really helpful for clients to be able to keep, say, an updated profile of themselves, so that these are the things they want in these options, and there's not more than one option that's going to cause them. Or maybe they want red products when they're in stock, blue is their second choice, right? And that's a function or feature that you can present in a form that you couldn't otherwise present on paper without a lot of extra work, right? Without you having to look up all of these other pieces of functions or inventory or those kinds of things. So anyway, you get my point. It's ease of receiving that data in volume and with consistency to the preferences of the customer. Also, one of the things about online forms and surveys that I really love, and this goes to the point of Google Analytics, which is capturing data passively for people, visiting your website, to forms where people are filling them out individually. You can then break apart those forms so that you can look at discrete individual data points, and you can also blend those individual data points together across a wide class of customers or a smaller class of customers, so that you can then synthesize that for making business decisions. So for example, you could ask a question in a survey that says, what color do you like? Do you like red, boxes or blue boxes? Well, if you can see that the majority of your customers in a particular demographic, say I'm looking for female customers between the age of 35 and 55, they overwhelmingly, say 87% of the time, choose blue boxes. Well, now you know something much more powerful about your customer demographic than you did before, and that means you can make a good business decision. And you can only do that when you can analyze and synthesize data on that level, because if you just keep anecdotal information as being the feeding or the driver of your business decisions, you're going to make poor decisions, and that's just a reality. Okay, so you see a couple of customers who tell you that they really like blue boxes. You get this general sense that your customers like blue boxes, but without the empirical evidence, without the empirical data to really confirm that, you end up making what I call shoot from the hip decisions. You're making decisions that aren't really founded in evidence, and this gives you that evidence. By asking the questions and seeing the real data, you're going to get the better options for business decision making. Okay, so just think about it from that perspective. As I said earlier, paper, email, and PDF capture, they create errors. People frequently don't have the ability to capture correctly in those formats. They make mistakes and they don't go back to correct them, especially on paper. Paper's highly inefficient when it comes to filling out information. People tend to nowadays, especially I was lamenting the other day with a group of teachers that children are not in all schools learning cursive. Cursive penmanship, and so even when you see someone writing today, since we don't write that often, you tend to see chicken scratch. That chicken scratch then becomes, or poor penmanship becomes illegible. You misinterpret information, those kinds of things. So we really just don't want to use paper very frequently. There are places for paper, but in this particular case, when we're talking about capturing business data, for the most part, online forms can do better. Email is another one of those. If you send an email out to all of your customers and ask them for their preferences regarding red boxes and blue boxes, and they send you back an email, well, you're going to get, you send out 150 emails, you're going to get 150 emails back, and you're going to have to collate that information manually. It just makes no sense that you would do that by email. It would be much easier if you sent out an email with a link to an online form or survey, which then got back that information in a format that allowed you to be able to look at graphically, that it automatically, tabulated the responses and answers by the person or by any number of different, perspectives, and so that way you can slice and dice that information effectively. Same thing with PDF capture. You email out a PDF survey to 150 people, you get back 150 PDFs, or you get back 50 PDFs, and then you get back another 50. I couldn't open the PDF. The PDF, questionnaire allowed me to fill it out, and then I printed it, and then the answers weren't there, and I closed the PDF, and now the PDF is empty. And so you get all of those troubleshooting problems that happen when it comes to filling documents out online, and online forms and surveys, by and large, remove those problems, those errors from occurring, okay? And then additionally, you can have auto-filled information. I'll show you a tool near the end of this webinar where we'll be able to, you can actually auto-fill data so that when you send the client the information, you've actually pre-populated information that you already know about them. So if you know their name, address, and phone number, and so on and so forth, you don't have to have them fill all that information out again. It's highly efficient for you to not have them, change information that they already have, that you already know about them. They then feel really great because you're saving them time, and additionally, they can then say, oh, well, actually that address is incorrect. I've moved since then, or my office has moved since then. And they can update that information, and now you can see that the customer has changed that information, and that really helps you understand something as well. And many times web browsers, modern web browsers today, they actually can create profiles for customers which allow them to autofill. So if they see a form on your website, they go to it, well, it can pre-populate that information so that you can just select, oh, this particular web form is going to need my name, address, phone, email, and some other information. It can pre-fill that for you from the web browser's information that you've saved there, and that saves time and energy. So instead of having to get a paper form that they print, or even a PDF form that they have to download, open up and data enter manually, that all gets either auto-populated by you or auto-populated by the browser, and now they're good to go. And then second side to that is what I call on-the-fly data validation. And what that means is that if you enter a social security number in a space that's supposed to have a phone number, it's going to tell you that it's the wrong set of numbers and in the wrong format or whatever, right? And or if you try to put an email address in an address field, it's going to say, oh, that's an email address, you should really put an address here, and vice versa, okay? So it can validate data that's incorrect by virtue of its format, and so that can be very, very helpful for being able to get things in. Also saying you need to put in a first and last name in order to be able to send this form so that I know who made the purchase. Many times people will put in initials or other kinds of things, and you can actually validate in some of these form builders so that you can actually make sure the data that you get is as correct as it can be, even though humans make errors, humans make mistakes. You know, we're doing these things, we're online, we're trying to get a bunch of things done, and you know, we see a form online, or we see an email that asks us to fill out a form, and sometimes we're just filling them out very quickly, and therefore we might miss something. And so data validation built into the form is really helpful. As I said earlier, you know, many times when we feel like we have a preference and that preference changes. Well, in some of the online forms, you can actually create a profile for a client, and therefore that allows you to edit and modify the data once it's entered. And that means that if a customer comes to you and says, oh, you know what, I filled out that form and, you know, I really meant to say that I like blue boxes and not red boxes. I really, really need you to change that so I don't get any red boxes. You can go ahead and change that information. You can edit and modify that data, whereas, you know, paper form, it becomes, you scratch it out, white out. I don't know what you do with the paper form nowadays, but you have to do some kind of editing to it, and that requires you to go hunt down a piece of paper, you know, that hopefully is filed correctly, and if that has been copied and passed forward to, you know, your fulfillment department, to a shipping vendor, to other people, now all of those documents that are copies of the original are wrong and need to be forwarded. You know, there's a lot of productivity loss and efficiency loss in that kind of idea. You know, I was working with a shipping, a large manufacturer who did a lot of shipping, and that was a real problem for them because they made copies to move with the product, and a copy then stayed with the person who had handled it. And so they would have 16, 17, you know, different copies of the same form as it made its way along the pipeline. The moment an online form was created and that was connected to their database, now they were able to update the status of who did what, when, and where. That moved along the channel. They had the log of what they needed in their system. There was removal of paper, and now something was wrong. They just went back and they edited it. You know, like this part needed to be swapped out for that part because it was broken, and we just put it in the wrong part number originally. So now we didn't have to go to 15 other people to actually correct that one little minor piece. Very, very helpful in streamlining and for productivity in your labor force. Finally, and I'll show you a tool for this at the end, that allows you to create automations, which is really, really great. You can automate a lot of stuff once you have some information about a customer from something as simple as a contact form on your website. You can create all kinds of levels of logic and automation for things to happen so that you can get things done without you actually having to do anything once the client has filled that out. So for example, I could say, okay, if a client fills out a purchase order on my website, well, then it will automatically create an invoice in QuickBooks. It'll then send in a thank you email to the client so that they have that email as confirmation that the purchase order has been received. And I also want it to actually email the fulfillment department so they know the details of this particular purchase order. So it's going to shoot them an email, and potentially it'll send me an email just letting me know that that order was sent in, and maybe putting in a calendar event so that I know to check on that fulfillment in, say, a week or 10 days when we know it will be delivered to the customer, and to make sure the customer is happy. So just a little, call client so they'll be able to do that. I can even have it email it into my task management system. So it says, call Jane Smith about, delivery of this product to make sure that she's happy with it, and if she has any questions about how to use it. So we can create these workflow automations just based on one form being completed, and it doing all of that work that would require, multiple people and lots of your time to make all of those things happen. So with online forms and surveys, you can do a wide variety of work and reduce the errors, increase business data so that you can make better business decisions. And that's really why we want to use online forms. And if for nothing else, it just eliminates costs, and there is this environmental impact reduction that happens when we can get rid of using paper and ink and all of this other, we have to have inventory of forms and all of these other things. Think about how much money the IRS saves in doing electronic data, today versus when they captured and collected all of this paper documentation. It's really, really important for them to be able to reduce paper, and they do, and they save a lot of trees, I suppose, by doing so. So if for nothing else, there is the benefit there of reducing costs and increasing your eco-friendliness. All right, so next up, I wanted to talk about what data can be captured when you're using online forms and surveys, but I first wanted to talk about what an online form and an online survey were in terms of their differences. I think that some people sometimes think about online forms and surveys and actually don't know what they are. So fundamentally, as a unit, an online form is purely just a collection tool that you place on a web page, right? So the online form itself, whether it itself has its own web page or whether you embed it on a page that you've created on your website or on some other web property that you have, it's basically a collection tool. And it's that broad of a term because it has many different kinds of fields or data entry points for it to be able to collect data. So there really is no way to functionally say an online form is one in which you receive text information or numeric information or checkboxes or whatever it is. It's just a collection tool, and there are many, many options when it comes to forms, but you just basically have it on a web page, right? The difference between an online form and a survey is that a survey is actually a type of online form, right? So an online survey is a type of online form, and it just asks questions of our, whether it be our, like I said, past, current, or future customers about their needs and wants, right? Their needs and desires, and their experiences along the customer journey. And that includes their likes and dislikes, their preferences for things. So surveys tend to give us those kinds of experiential and desire and need-based feedback that we want from our customers, okay? So surveys tend to be pre or post, a purchase event, right? So we want to know information before a customer buys. We want to know a piece of information after the customer buys. And typically online forms are transactional in nature. They're there to get information in order to provide information or delivery of a service. And finally, there's a tertiary here, one. I don't use it in terms of titling because it's just a survey, but typically people talk about polls or online polls, and online polls are purely just one-question surveys. So they're a type of form, but they end up being one-question surveys, okay? And so you can ask a poll, for a number of different things. Are you happy today? Yes, no, or maybe, right? And then the poll graphically shows, who chose what, right? 20% are happy today, 20% are not happy today, and then we have 60% that are undecided or maybe, right? You can do that, but an online poll is basically a one-question survey. So with that in mind, we now want to talk about what data can be captured. And I just want to go through a quick survey of the data that can be captured so that we can sort of, think about the ideas. I hope that by talking about these, it's generative for you, so that you can start to ideate ways in which you can use online forms in your business, because I believe that there are lots and lots of opportunities for online forms where you don't necessarily think about it until you're given the space to do so. So I'm going to give these ideas here. There are many, many more, but I just wanted to give some ideas so that it can start to create some ideas. You obviously should, as you come up with ideas, write them down while I'm talking about this, and hopefully that will help. So one is customer personal information, right? So many times you have to get information from customers like a name or a business name, address, shipping details, and so on and so forth, and those can all be collected, right? Payment method, and for example, some businesses collect payment method because they run transactions in-house, through a credit card processing system or their point of sale system. Some people use another service like PayPal or Stripe or another tool, another payment gateway and merchant account that processes that information and holds the credit card information. So you as the business owner don't actually have access to it, but it's saved somewhere so that it's accessible and used by the business for, collecting payment. So You could do all of that in many different online forms, but it's just an easy way to keep an up-to-date version, or at least capture initially the information you need in order to be able to contact them. Contact information is always tantamount. Are they giving you an email address or a phone number or something so that you're able to communicate with them? Being able to capture that data is really, really important. Next is the customer experience, and we talked about this regarding surveys. Typically, we have surveys for the purposes of understanding the customer journey or customer experience, but this also happens in customer support. If someone has a problem, an online form is a really great way in which you can go ahead and find out from them what that problem is so that you can respond to them and provide customer support. So some people might have a contact page on their website, and frequently what you have is just a here goes a form to contact us, and it's very generic. We have that on our website, but we also have independent tech support for our web hosting, our WordPress, managed WordPress hosting and domains and so on and so forth. It's a completely different place where people can go to fill out that form and get bespoke support. And so you can ask very, very tailored questions in that form as opposed to the general, I just need to contact you, I don't know you, I don't have a relationship with you yet, but I want to find out this information to see if I do want to engage with you for some purpose. So you can touch your customers at different points in their customer journey through an online form or a survey so that you can figure that information out that's most important to them and you so that you can provide a solution. Next up are testimonials. It's really great to finish off a project with a customer, for them to be ecstatic with you, right? And then send them a survey that asks them about their experience. And you can then ask them within that survey, hey, would you write us a testimonial so that we can, publish it and let people know about how great you think we are. And so testimonials are a great thing to capture in a form, and sometimes there are mechanisms for that built into websites. There are forms built into websites where you can just do that, or you can have a survey that's sent after, like basically you send out your paid invoice to your customer, your receipt from payment for your final, deliverable. You send them that invoice, and then in that email you can say, hey, by the way, we love to collect testimonials. If you're willing to share your testimonial, feel free to go ahead and do that. And they can go ahead and provide that feedback, and then you get a testimonial. Also, something that I find to be really useful in a lot of online forums, especially for technology companies, is the ability to upload a file or a document to them. So for example, I am visiting a small business website, and I see a problem with the website, something is not working right. And I can describe it to them in excruciating detail, right, in words, in their little, form, or I can say, see the problem, and I can take a screenshot, attach an image of what I'm seeing is the problem, and then all they need to do is look at the picture. And so if I'm having a problem with a piece of software, or I'm having a problem with a product that I've purchased that's digital in nature, say a client sent me a PDF and I'm having a problem with understanding how the PDF works, I could take a screenshot with it and even annotate the screenshot using software and then send that back to them in their online form so they can go ahead and see what's going on. So really, really helpful to be able to have file and document uploads. There are security issues as it relates to that, so make sure that whatever tool you're using is competent to be able to handle that kind of thing. But the ones that I've seen do it well, and it's really great to have. You can also find out budget or project parameters. This is something really great in service fields where, and sometimes in product fields as well, but or retail businesses, but I find this to be very, very helpful for my service professional clients. So if you're a service professional and you're looking to find out how much is this customer really looking to spend, well, you can ask an ordinal question, that basically says, is your project, is your budget for this project between $10 and $50, or $1,000 and $5,000, or are you looking to spend, $700 or to $15,000? It doesn't matter what the spectrum is. For you create what are the general buckets for your customer, and now you can find out information from them frequently, you don't want to make this required information because then people won't complete the form. So some people just generally don't want to tell you how much their budget is because they want you to send back an estimate or a quote for your fees without you knowing that. But some customers don't care. Some clients will just tell you, this is the budget. You either come in under the budget or you don't. And that could be very, very helpful business information for you. One, fine, I'm not going to bid on this because it's just way below my pay grade. Maybe it's way above. They're going to expect something of me that's way more, dollar value than my service firm can provide. Or their project parameters are way outside of what we can provide as a scope of work. So you can make those choices by asking those questions up front. Also, I love forms sort of like in the customer experience point that I made, is getting feedback, suggestions, and recommendations. Just having a general place on your website where you can have recommendations and suggestions sent to you can be gold mines. What if your customers just told you what they wanted whenever they felt like it? That would be fantastic, wouldn't it? Well, you can facilitate that by consistently reinforcing in your brand messaging, that is your ongoing messaging out to your customers, your communications out to your customers, saying, hey, whenever you want to tell us about a new product we should have on the shelves, the options we should have with particular products, or things that you just really don't like about our service or our product, let us know. And that way you can start to see the pulse of the information, that once you start to get enough of these ideas, you can start to decide whether or not, hey, should we do a full-blown survey and see if this is really a problem? Is this really a problem we can solve? Is this a problem with us? Is this a problem that we can turn into a market opportunity? Or is the problem a market opportunity? And really grow your business in potentially different verticals, different service lines, different product lines that you otherwise wouldn't be able to do. Feedback is so important when it's constructive, obviously. So obviously, messages that say, you're terrible, we hate you, is not really going to be helpful. But feedback that's constructive should always be facilitated and welcomed from your customers. And so find ways in which to do that so that you can go ahead and have forms on your website specifically for that are sent to the right people, which for most micropreneurs and solopreneurs, that'll be you, the business owner, but if your business is a little bit bigger, then to the appropriate parties, to the people who are going to be able to take those ideas, think them through, either on the executive team or on some other administrative level, and make sure that you're looking at those ideas so that you can figure out what to do with them. Really, really helpful. Okay. Finally, there's some information that's just not so easily asked face-to-face in real time. And people are just uncomfortable sharing certain types of information that they might be not so uncomfortable with in a more, let's say, clinical approach, which is just filling out a form with that information, right? So if you have to say something face-to-face to someone, it could be embarrassing. Maybe you're just, it could be something embarrassing about what you've done or what you feel about yourself or whatever it might be. But you can ask for reasoning of things that people might be uncomfortable with, and they can provide that information in writing, which makes it feel a little bit less daunting when someone's face-to-face and you have to verbalize that, out loud. So sometimes an online form can be very, very helpful. Obviously, in those circumstances, you want to reinforce the fact that this is a private communication, that it's going to be kept confidential, and that your online form actually secures, through HTTPS and SSL encryption or stronger encryption than that even, so that you can make sure that they're comfortable with sharing that kind of personal, it may not even be personal information, just may be information that they feel, better to write. And then the other side is if it's long, like if they have to detail some very long story, okay? Well, you can sit there and listen to them tell the entire story, or they can put that in writing, which can sometimes be much more thoughtful, because they can spend time writing the appropriate message without rambling on in different directions and so on and so forth. They can really logically think out their thoughts, delete things, correct it all, and then send it to you in the form, as opposed to them spending 15 or 20 minutes or an hour, say, telling you something over and over again in different patches and pieces and getting things wrong, and then you getting a misperception of the situation. Okay, so there are sometimes really, really important times to collect information online in a form than to do that in real time, face-to-face. So those are some ideas regarding data that can be captured using online forms and surveys. And I wanted to just make a couple of notes on survey design and practice, because I think a lot of people think about surveys and they get really, I don't know, nervous about them, because surveys are generally things that social scientists struggle over themselves. You know, there's lots of debate and argument over how to build a survey and those kinds of things. So I just wanted to give a couple of pointers here. I didn't enumerate them on slides because I just didn't think it was important enough, but I think that you should Google this and look at survey design as its own fundamental practice, but know that there are basically 4 different types of questions that you ask when you set up a survey. But we start before that with the idea of why send the survey? What is the reason for the survey? And making sure that you're identifying the reasons for the survey in the first place so that you're able to get the appropriate data out, right? Deciding why you're doing the survey helps you then formulate the questions most appropriately, okay? And then you can come to the idea of figuring out what questions to ask so that you can get the right answers. So survey question typing is really important so that you can model your survey appropriately. So you have categorical questions. Categorical questions can be that can include basically counting the number of things or the percentages of things. So you can say, I'd like to know a yes or no answer to a question. Are you male or female? Are you under 6 foot or are you over 6 foot? Questions of that nature. Now when you ask these types of questions, always understand how bias or framing can be effectively using people, changing people's responses. So this comes into a little bit of psychology when it comes into it. So think about it from this perspective. If I say to somebody, what's your gender? And they put in female. Well, what we know from social science, from studies and research that has been done, is that when someone checks the box female, so that is presumably females, when females do that, they tend to rate their performance and responses differently, that is their performance worse and their responses differently, than if they weren't asked that question up front. So make sure that you're asking some of those kinds of biographical, we call biographical, or demographical information at the end of your survey. Okay, because what that does is it says we're looking for information from a neutral perspective, and that goes to the case of leading questions, bias and framing in mind again, which is that if you've watched Matlock or Perry Mason or more recently Law and Order, you sort of see what they talk about when a lawyer is litigating a case in front of the judge and they're considered leading the witness, right? They're asking questions that basically frame a response by the question itself, by the very nature of the question. Well, you don't want to do that in surveys because that's going to muddy your data. So in survey design, you really want to think about how you go ahead and structure the questions so they can be as neutral as possible. And the only way to do that is to write your questions and show them to others to see if others feel like there's a natural answer to that question. If there's a natural answer to that question likely is leading, right? So the idea is to write questions in such a way that neutrally frames it, asking information about the user that's answering the survey so that it's after the fact, and asking those types of choice or preferential questions up front, and asking those more information-based questions, informational, biographical, demographical information after the fact. Okay, so really important there. So there are categorical questions, there are ordinal questions. Ordinal questions are ranges. Say that I want to know, do you make between $10,000 and $20,000 per year? Do you make between $20,000 and $30,000 per year? 30 to 50, 30 to 40, 40 to 50, and 50 plus, something like that, right? So those are the kinds of ordinal questions that we can ask, and typically are multiple choice, right? We can then ask for interval or what are called ratio questions. And these are questions that are on a scale of 1 to 10 or a scale of 1 to 5, or do you strongly agree or strongly disagree, or are you neutral to this particular response? Those are really powerful questions within a survey and should predominantly dominate the questions that happen in surveys. So frequently what happens in surveys is that we ask a lot of categorical questions, and then we ask a bunch of ordinal questions, and we don't actually ask any interval or ratio questions. And for the most part, we should think about more interval and ratio questions when it comes to surveys. Why? Because surveys are about the customer journey and the customer experience, and I'm not talking about surveys outside of, business, right? So there are really good reasons for those being in, other surveys being designed differently. When it comes to business surveys, we're typically trying to find out, that biographical, demographical information right at the end of a survey, just so we can classify people. But really we're looking for preference. We're looking for desires and needs and wants and their experience through the customer journey, and that usually allows us to use the those ratio and interval questions explicitly and exclusively, and getting all the information that we need. So just keep that in mind, that you should really dominate on there. Be plain language regarding the questions that you ask in surveys. So frequently people use technical jargon or other kinds of terminology that people don't understand. So be as plain language as possible in your questions, as well as being specific. Don't ask vague questions, because vague questions, especially in multiple choice questions, become very, very difficult to respond to. So for example, if people ask a question like, do you like apples, oranges, or grapes? And the answer is going to be some mixture of those. If it's not a multiple choice question and it's just a yes or no, basically a categorical yes or no, then you're not going to get good data out of that. What's the answer to, apples, oranges, or grapes, yes or no? And frequently I see these in surveys, and then when the data comes in, it doesn't mean anything, and so therefore people are confused. So be very, very wary of how you're, being specific and asking the question correctly, so that people can give you the right answers. And so those are my basic tips regarding surveys. Obviously you want to make sure that you give people the appropriate mechanisms for flowing through the survey. If a survey is going to take 2 or 3 full scroll bars on a web page, break it up into multiple pages so people can stay on the same screen and just click next, and then submit, so that you don't have to scroll too far down any particular page as you're filling out a survey. So those are just some survey design practices that I thought I should make note of. And what I want to do now is jump out of the presentation deck to some of the tools that you can use that I really like and that I've seen my customers use and that they really like, and hopefully you'll be able to utilize those as well. So the first one, I presume you can guess my bias here, because I am a Google Small Business Advisor, is Google Forms. But I swear it is not a bias because of that. It really is that it's a very, very competent form builder. Okay, so Google Forms is built into the Google Drive platform. So if you have a Google account, it is free. If you have a G Suite account that you're paying for, it's built into the platform, and therefore it's part of that package, the suite. And this is what the form looks like when you come to the platform. So what's really great here is that you have these templates that Google has provided, and they have a template gallery so that you're able to see all the various templates, and you can see that we don't have any templates in here that we've created or submitted, but you have your template gallery that you can create, and then you have these basic templates that Google has provided to you so that you can go ahead in and modify them to your needs and get stuff, get data entered. The great part about Google Forms is that you have lots of customization. You can embed them very easily, so you can either send someone to a link to this specific questionnaire or form or feedback or whatnot, or you can embed it directly on your website, okay, so that it ends up being on your website as opposed to being its own web page, okay? And the other part that I really love about this is you can embed videos, you can embed images, so you can say, here goes a picture of our product. What do you like about it visually? And then leave an open paragraph text field so they can give a little bit of information on what they like about it. So you could do a lot of really interesting things with a Google form by providing that. And so one form that I've created for a particular program that we run is it shows a video, and so it explains what this person needs to do as they fill out an application, right? So it says, oh, you know, this is our program, this is how it works, and yada, yada, yada. And below, you're going to see we have 3 pages of the application. The first page covers this, the second page covers that, the third page covers that, and please make sure that on the third page you click submit. And so you can direct people verbally and visually through the form before they ever get to it. So it's really, really helpful that you can embed videos inside of Google Forms. So that's Google Forms. I wanted to show you just very, very quickly, finally, Google Forms also allow you to go ahead and submit the information into 2 different options of database. So you can use the Google Forms built-in database, which really is for very, very basic preference polling type questions, right? So if you just want to send a poll for something, Google Forms could do it really well because it takes that one data point and one set of data points, and it can quickly create percentages and other kinds of information based on that. But once you start to use that as a questionnaire, Google Forms doesn't do a very good job of collating all of that data for the individual response. So that's really better to use in something like Google Sheets. So Google Forms gives you the option to say, if someone fills out this Google form, I want you to create a Google Sheets workbook and place each of the respondents' information on their own row. So it fills out the row by row information of the respondents to the survey, and what you get is this really great database of information, because it's just like, you know, Google Sheets is the equivalent of Microsoft Excel. You can graphically show information, you can hide particular fields in the spreadsheet workbook, so you can just narrow it down to information that you just want to look at. You can create charts and graphs on the fly, and all kinds of really great information you can analyze and synthesize from a Google Sheets workbook that you couldn't otherwise do if you were just looking inside the Google Forms capture tool itself. So really, really cool stuff there. Okay, so next up I wanted to show you just a quick view of what it looks like. So this is our website. I'm logged into our installation, so you can see this is the W3 Consulting website, and here we have a Google form, which is our contact page. And so here people can fill out the information they need to, and they can select a couple of things, they can write a message, and then click submit. Okay, and this is just the embedded form, and you can see that I've in HTML turned off scrolling so people can't scroll inside of it, so it's just embedded very neatly in the page, and it works brilliantly. You know, we get the messages, they're documented in our spreadsheet for customer service purposes, and we have all those messages emailed out to the appropriate parties as they check them off. So really, really helpful to see, and to get it, and it's all there in the form. Okay, next up, I'm going to actually hop over to this one, which is SurveyMonkey. So SurveyMonkey is a survey tool specifically, and note that I'm jumping around between forms and surveys and whatnot because you can create surveys with forms, and surveys are just a type of form, etc. Right? So, so SurveyMonkey is at least as of the time of this webinar, I think it's about $25 a month or something like that. I think there are free plans you can try, and there's a free version that you can use, but you're limited in terms of what you can do. But SurveyMonkey is great because you can create surveys using templates that they have. Dissimilar to Google Forms, there is quite a bit of page and conditional logic, meaning that based on the user who shows up and the questions that they answer, you can hide or show specific questions, right? So, you can ask, say, using a bad example because I just told you not to ask gender up front, but say you asked people if they're male or female at some point in the survey. Let's say it's later on in the survey, and that person checks female. Well, that's going to open up a series of questions that say if this was a home product and it was about children, you would say, well, when did have you ever given birth to a child? How many children? When was the birth of your last child? And that gives a lot of information regarding whether or not that mother would be needing your product, whether it was for baby, an infant, adolescent, young adult, that kind of thing, and be very helpful, versus when they clicked male, they wouldn't get the questions, obviously, that asks when they gave birth to their last child. Maybe it was reworded to when did your, spouse, wife, spouse, or partner give birth to the child, or whatever it is, when was your first child born? And so now it's a little bit more tailored to the male. Or maybe that page isn't even shown to males because you're going to try and walk them down a different path with regard to asking them questions that are helpful to understanding your product. That makes sense? You can use this kind of logic to be able to do that. You can also do quizzes. There's a mobile app that's available for this. So the Google Forms are mobile responsive, so you can totally do them on a mobile device. Really great, but these actually have mobile apps for you as the business owner to be able to read and review the information. And so really, really cool stuff. Also, this has answer validation. So Google Forms has some answer validation in terms of formatting, but this one can actually say, based on the answer you gave before, that's not actually the right answer that you're giving now, and those kinds of things. So you can actually use prior answers in future responses to dictate whether or not, those questions are right or wrong, and all those kinds of things. And SurveyMonkey also has a really great tool which allows you to basically be able to source respondents. So if you don't have a customer base yet, you can actually pay SurveyMonkey to go out and ask people questions that fit your market demographic. So really, really great for market research if you don't have it yet. Okay, next up is a WordPress tool called Ninja Forms. And we've used these on several client websites that basically allow you to build forms inside of the WordPress database and display them on the front end, and you can do lots and lots of stuff. So the free version is fully competent to do most of what you need in terms of online forms. If you need to do something more sophisticated survey-wise, there's a Pro Edition and add-on that allows you to be able to do that. And really, Ninja Forms is great. It's very, very powerful. There are lots of other WordPress-based form builders, and Ninja Forms is one of those that fits at the top of that list. Wufoo is one that actually quite a lot of our clients use, and they start with a free version and work their way up to, for most businesses, it ends up being the bona fide version of the $30 level. But you can create web forms, and very easy to display, easy to use tool there. And so I very highly recommend it if you need to be able to take those web forms and use automations, and I'll talk about that very, very soon. So hold your horses on the automations. Next up is Jetpack. This one is actually built by the same folks who build WordPress, the WordPress.com, as well as the WordPress self-hosted that is hosted within your own hosting account. And so you can actually create your own WordPress contact form using the contact form button. You can move around fields. You can get an email notification after each response. They give you a feedback area where the feedback is actually in the WordPress data dashboard, so you can answer those questions and respond to them in that space. It's very, very flexible, and it connects to their spam filtering software so that you can actually start to filter out some of those spam messages. And so really, really great tool there. And last but not least is a product that I've recently come into contact with, and I've been in contact with the developers over at LaunchCloud, or the owners, not the developers, and they're this really fantastic tool that really has a lot of features. And so I am just starting to get myself sort of comfortable with the tool, and but there's just so many features here. So I'm going to go down to the feature set here, but there are some really, really cool stuff. So just starting from the perspective that you can take payments, so you can, in the Pro version, I believe, you can take payments directly in. You can calendar. So let me give you a scenario, okay? So say somebody is a consultant and they want to be able to get some basic information from a customer. They want to be able to have them pay, and then subsequent to paying, they want to schedule a time in their calendar so that they can go ahead and do that. This tool allows you to do that all in the same fluid experience, okay? And so it's a drag and drop form builder, so you just drag the pieces into place, and then it on the fly creates this form, and now you get this very easy to embed on your website form, and people can show up, oh, I want to, engage this consultant. I type in my name and information and so on and so forth. I type in my payment information. Once I've paid, now I see the calendar for me to be able to put in some times that I would be available to meet with that person, and then they submit the whole thing. So the person is able to then go ahead and do all of that in the same form. It's absolutely brilliant, and you can do signatures. You can, as you can see here, you can add audio and video recordings. Someone can, what I'm presuming here is that a customer can provide feedback by audio, so they can submit an audio question. I'm thinking about using this for my podcast, so people can ask questions by voice, and therefore it be actually on the podcast, right? And be, I could splice their audio directly into the podcast that way. You can look up data that already exists about yourself in the form as a visitor, and so therefore you can go ahead and pre-populate information that you have. I'm sorry, so I think it's on the other side. The business owner, you as the business owner, can pre-populate data from your database so that the user sees this auto-filled information. Attached documents, you can create tables, just so many great fields, options in here, field validation as I talked about, and all kinds of really cool stuff. So if you're interested, go out and check launchcloud.com and see if you need something that's fairly sophisticated in terms of being able to handle a wide variety of different forms and surveys and being able to manage that data. This really does, and it connects, it integrates with so many other tools, like it integrates with Evernote, integrates with all kinds of other CRMs and other tools that allows LaunchCloud itself to be able to do some really sophisticated stuff. So just wanted to throw that out there. And and I promised this, and before we close out, is for those of you who want to automate stuff, as I talked about in the early part of the webinar, the idea of being able to stack automations. Zapier is the tool that I was talking about as it relates to the ability to automate things. So you can say enter a piece of information into a form and then have it do a series of tasks set up to be connected to other things. And Zapier allows you to do that. It's pretty inexpensive and allows you to be able to do these kinds of really, really great automations. So I highly recommend that you check it out if you plan on doing these kinds of sophisticated workflow automations. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tracy. We can of course do Q&A after we close out. I'll be happy to stay as long as you'd like to answer questions.
Okay, thank you, Ray. Some great information. We don't currently have any questions, but if you all want to type your questions into the question window as I close out, that would be great. Thank you all for participating today. Today's webinar was recorded and will be posted on the Virginia SBDC website under live webinars and recordings. Tomorrow you'll be receiving a follow-up email on the webinar, and there'll be an evaluation link in the email. Please help us to continue to improve our training by taking the time to complete the evaluation. Evaluation was done in SurveyMonkey. If you want to fill out the evaluation now, I have put it in the chat field, so you can go ahead and click on that. Our next webinar is May 18th, What's in Your Wallet? Taking and Making Payments Online for Service Professionals. Ray, we don't have any questions, so we'll go ahead and close out the webinar. Thank you, everyone, for participating.